Story begins. The old man set the boots on the counter like they were made of glass, and Marcus almost laughed before he saw the way the man's hands trembled. Not from age, but from something closer to fear. They were the ugliest pair of boots Marcus had ever been asked to repair. Cracked leather the color of dried tobacco, soles worn paper-thin on the left heel, stitching that had given up decades ago. "Sir, I can resole these," Marcus said gently, "but honestly, a new pair would cost you about the same." The old man didn't move. His eyes, pale and steady, held Marcus the way a man holds a door he isn't sure he wants to open. "You'll want to look inside the left sole before you throw anything away," he said quietly, "because what's hidden in there was never supposed to leave the ground it was buried in, and neither was I." What city are you watching this from right now? Drop it in the comments below. And if you love stories about people history tried to erase, hit that subscribe button, you won't regret it. Because when Marcus finally cut open that left sole, 2 federal agents were standing in his shop within the hour. And what the old man told them made one of them lower his eyes like a soldier who just learned the truth too late. What did those boots prove he had done? Morning came slow over the river town of Calder's Bend, Ohio. Fog sat low on the water and crept up the brick alleys behind Main Street, softening the edges of everything it touched. Inside a narrow storefront with a hand-painted sign that read "Renner Shoe Repair," the lights flickered on at 7:14 in the morning, 16 minutes before the door would flip to open. Marcus Renner moved through the shop the way a man moves through a place he has known his whole life. He was 28, broad through the shoulders from a body that worked for its living, with calloused fingers stained dark at the tips from years of leather dye and shoe polish. The shop smelled the way it always did: neat's foot oil, rubber cement, the faint sweetness of beeswax, the sharp mineral bite of fresh-cut leather. He brewed coffee in the back, black, and drank it standing at the workbench while the radiator clanked itself awake. The shop had belonged to his grandfather, then his father, and now him. 3 generations of hands had worn smooth the wooden handle of the same finishing wheel. The walls were lined with shelves of shoes waiting to be claimed, each tagged with a paper ticket and a name. A cobbler's last hung from a hook by the window, iron gone black with age. Above the back bench, half hidden behind a calendar from a leather supplier, was a small framed photograph nobody ever asked about. 6 men standing in front of a stone building somewhere far away, their faces washed pale by sun and time. Marcus had looked at it 1,000 times and never known a single name. There was a routine to his mornings: coffee, sweep the floor, check the repairs drying on the racks. He had done it for 912 days since taking over from his father, and he liked the rhythm of it, the way the same small motions stacked into a life. The town outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that came from a place the world had mostly forgotten. Factories closed, young people gone. The ones who stayed brought him their boots and their loafers and their children's school shoes, and Marcus mended what could be mended. At 8:30, his first customer came in. Hollis Tate, a retired railroad man who needed new heel caps on a pair of work boots he refused to replace. Hollis leaned on the counter and talked the way lonely men talk, in long loops about nothing. But that morning he said something that snagged in Marcus's mind like a thorn. "Strangers in town," Hollis said. "Government-looking fellas. Suits, rental car, the kind of polite that makes your skin itch. Been asking the diner folks about old-timers. Vets, mostly. Anybody who came through here in the 70s. Marcus kept his eyes on the heel cap. "Census, maybe." "Census don't wear shoulder holsters," Hollis said. "Saw it when he reached for his wallet. Just thought it was strange is all." The conversation moved on. Hollis paid in crumpled bills and left at 8:51. But Marcus stood at the bench a moment longer than he needed to, looking at nothing, before he went back to work. At 11:40, the bell above the door chimed, and the old man walked in. He moved slowly, but not with the frailty Marcus expected. It was a careful kind of slowness, deliberate, the way a man moves when he has trained himself never to waste emotion. He wore a gray canvas coat buttoned to the throat despite the warmth, trousers pressed sharp at the seam, and on his feet a pair of cheap modern sneakers that looked wrong on him, like a borrowed costume. In his hands he carried the boots, wrapped in a square of oilcloth. He set the bundle on the counter, unwrapped it without a word. The boots appeared one at a time, old, cracked, the leather gone the color of dried tobacco. The left heel worn to almost nothing, a repair from another century. Marcus picked one up, turned it in the light. He was kind about it, the way you are kind to someone who doesn't understand the cost of things. "Sir, I can fix these, but I'd be doing you a favor to tell you the truth. The leather's past saving on the uppers. A decent new pair runs you less than what good restoration would. These have had a long life." The old man said nothing. He watched Marcus with eyes that did not blink as often as they should. "You're attached to them," Marcus said. "I get it. People are with their boots." He set it down. "I can resole the bottoms, replace the heel, condition what's left, but I won't charge you for a miracle I can't perform." "You'll want to look inside the left sole," the old man said. His voice was low even, with the flat precision of a man who measured every word before he spent it. "Before you throw anything away." Marcus frowned. "Inside the sole? Cut it open, the layer beneath the insole. There's a seam there that was sewn by hand, not by machine. You'll feel it if you press." Something in the way he said it made Marcus stop being patient and start being curious. He pressed his thumb along the inside of the left boot, just behind the ball of the foot. The leather was firmer there than it should have been, thicker. He pressed harder and felt it, a ridge, a hard line running across where no line should be. He looked up. The old man was still watching him. "What's in here?" Marcus asked. "Open it and find out." He shouldn't have. A good cobbler doesn't cut a customer's shoe apart without knowing why. But his hands were already reaching for the curved knife on the bench. He worked the blade carefully under the worn insole, peeled it back. Beneath it, where a layer of cork and leather should have been solid, there was a flat compartment, no thicker than a deck of cards, sewn shut with waxed thread in tight, even stitches that no machine had ever made. Marcus's breath went shallow. He cut the thread. Inside was a folded square of oilskin, brittle with age but intact. He drew it out with 2 fingers, unfolded it on the counter, slow, like a man diffusing something. It was a document, typed, single-spaced, the paper gone the color of weak tea. Across the top, stamped in red ink faded to rust, were 4 words that made the back of his neck go cold. "Classified, eyes only, state." Below that, a string of numbers and a single line of text in a language he didn't recognize, and beneath that, in English, "Transit authorization, Courier 9, do not intercept." Marcus stared at it. The shop had gone very quiet. Outside, a truck passed on Main Street and was gone. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "It was given to me," the old man said. "A long time ago, in a city that doesn't keep the records it used to." But that wasn't the part that made Marcus's hands start to shake. It was the date stamped at the bottom of the page. October 1971. And below the date, a name had been typed, then struck through with a typewriter's overstrike, X over X over X, until it was nothing but a black bar. As if someone had decided that the man who carried this should not officially have a name at all. "Who are you?" Marcus said. The old man almost smiled. "You can call me Walter. Not my name is Walter. You can call me Walter. There's a difference, and you'll understand it before the day is over." Marcus looked back down at the document. There was a second sheet folded behind the first, thinner, almost translucent. He unfolded it. A map, hand-drawn, precise, showing a river, a bridge, a stretch of border he couldn't place, and 3 small crosses marked along a route, with times written beside each in military notation. 0200, 0340, 0515. "That's a crossing," Marcus said slowly. He didn't know how he knew. He just did. "Somebody planned a crossing." "Somebody made it," Walter said. 3 times. The first 2, we lost people. The third one, everyone got through. The boots you're holding walked that route. The compartment under your hand carried what those people couldn't be caught carrying." Marcus set the knife down. His mouth was dry. "Carried what?" "Names," Walter said. "Lists. sometimes a person, folded small. Once, a child's photograph that a mother in the East needed to know had reached the West alive. The sole of a shoe is a strange place to hide a war. Nobody searches a poor man's feet. The bell above the door chimed. Marcus jumped. A young woman came in holding a pair of sandals with a broken strap, looked at the two of them, sensed something she couldn't name, set the sandals on the end of the counter and said she'd come back later. She left fast. The door swung shut. Walter hadn't turned to look at her. He kept his eyes on Marcus. "Why now?" Marcus asked. "These have been buried, hidden, for 50 years. Why bring them in now?" "Because for 50 years, nobody was looking for them." Walter's voice dropped. "Now somebody is. 3 days ago, a man came to the room where I live. He was polite. He asked me questions a stranger has no business knowing the answers to. He used a name I haven't heard spoken aloud since 1972. And when I told him he had the wrong old man, he smiled and said, 'Of course, my mistake.' And then he wrote something down." Marcus felt the cold travel down his spine. "The government men. Hollis said there were government men in town." Walter's expression didn't change, but something moved behind his eyes. "Then they're closer than I hoped." That's when Marcus's phone buzzed against the wooden bench. He looked down. A text from a number with no name. He read it once, read it again. The words didn't change. "Who accessed transit document Courier 9 at this location? Respond immediately." Marcus's hand went still. "How?" he said. "How would anyone know I just opened it. I just now opened it. Nobody could—" "The document is tagged," Walter said quietly. "Some of them were. A thin foil thread in the oilskin, inert for decades. But if it's ever moved, unfolded, scanned near the wrong kind of reader—" He stopped. "I told you. The world keeps fewer records than it used to. But the ones it keeps, it watches." The phone buzzed again. "This is a matter of national security. Do not destroy the document. Do not allow the individual to leave. Federal personnel en route. Compliance is not optional." Marcus set the phone face down on the counter, as if that could unsay what it had said. His heart was going hard now. He looked at the old man, at Walter, or whatever his name truly was, standing calm in a borrowed pair of sneakers, in a shoe repair shop in a forgotten town, while something with the weight of 50 years bore down on both of them. "They're coming here," Marcus said. "Yes." "What do they want?" "To know I'm alive," Walter said. "And then, very likely, to make sure I'm not. Again." The word "again" hung in the air. Marcus walked to the front window and looked out at Main Street. Fog had burned off into a thin gray morning, the diner across the way, the shuttered hardware store, and parked at the corner where it hadn't been 20 minutes ago, a dark sedan with 2 men sitting inside, not talking, not moving, just watching the front of his shop. "There's a car," Marcus said. His voice came out smaller than he wanted. "How many men?" "2. Suits?" "Yeah." Walter exhaled slowly through his nose. "Listen to me," he said, and now the careful slowness was gone from his voice, replaced by something hard and clear, the voice of a man who had given instructions under fire. "When they come in, you tell them exactly what happened. You're a cobbler. I brought you a pair of boots. You found something inside. You opened it because I asked you to. That's all true, and the truth will protect you. Do you understand? Don't lie to them. Don't try to be clever. Tell them what you saw. What about you? Don't worry about me. Whatever they say about me, whatever they call me, let them. But you remember one thing." Walter put his hand flat on the counter beside the document. "You remember that this is real, that these boots walked a real road, that the people they carried were real, and most of them lived because of what was hidden under a stranger's feet. They will want you to believe it never happened. Don't let them take that from you." Outside, the doors of the sedan opened. 2 men stepped out, buttoned their jackets, and started across the street toward the shop. They walked the way Hollis had described. Too clean, too even, scanning the storefronts in a way that wasn't casual at all. "They're coming," Marcus said. Walter straightened his coat, squared his shoulders, and for just a moment the old man was gone. And standing in his place was a younger figure, a shape Marcus could only half see. Someone who had done this 100 times before, who knew exactly how to stand when the door opened. The bell chimed. The two men entered, mid-40s, fit, faces practiced into pleasantness. The first one let his eyes travel the shop in a slow sweep, the shelves, the racks, the back room, the exits, before they settled on Marcus. "Afternoon," he said, easy and warm. "We're hoping you can help us. We're looking for someone who may have come in here today carrying some old documents, historical material. Belongs to the government, technically. We'd just like to take a look." Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The second man's gaze had already found the document on the counter, and then it found the old man standing beside it. His expression didn't change, but he went very still, the way a hunter goes still. "Sir," the first man said to Marcus, "if you could just hand over whatever he brought in and step back, we'll be out of your way in 5 minutes." "You won't be taking anything," Walter said. His voice was quiet, but it changed the air in the room. The first man barely glanced at him. "Sir, this doesn't involve you. Please have a seat." "Courier 9, Walter said. "Issued out of the consulate, October of 1971. Transit corridor designated Cardinal. 3 crossings, February of 72, the bridge route. You'll find it in the sealed file under Operation Blacksmith, if your clearance reaches that far. It very likely doesn't." The second man stopped moving entirely. The first man's easy smile faltered. "How do you know that?" "You—" "Because I carried it," Walter said. "In the left sole of those boots, across that bridge, 3 times. The last time with 2 bullets in me and a list of 41 names that would have been 41 executions if they'd searched my feet at the checkpoint." He paused. "They didn't search my feet. Nobody searches a poor man's feet. That was the entire point of me." The second man took a step closer, peering at Walter's face the way you study something you're afraid to recognize. "What was your designation?" he asked, and his voice had gone careful, almost soft. "Cardinal," Walter said. "Courier 9. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The second man's hand twitched at his side, started to rise, and Marcus realized with a jolt that the man had begun, instinctively, to come to attention. He caught himself, lowered the hand. "That's not possible," the second man said. "Courier 9 was lost. The bridge. February 72. It's in the file. He didn't make the last crossing. He's a star on the wall." Walter's mouth curved into something that was not a smile. "I've been told. I'd like to see it sometime. I imagine they spelled the name wrong, since they never knew it. What do you think happens next? Tell us in the comments. And if stories about the people who were erased from history mean something to you, subscribe. There's more coming." For a long moment, nobody in the shop moved. The first agent's pleasant mask had slid off entirely. He looked from Walter to his partner and back, a man realizing the ground he'd been standing on was not the ground he thought. "Daniels," the first agent said quietly to the second. "What is this?" The second agent, Daniels, didn't answer right away. He was still looking at Walter, and there was something working in his face, some collision between what he'd been trained to believe and what was standing in front of him. "My father served state security in the 70s, Daniels said slowly, to no one in particular. "Vienna Station. He used to tell a story when he'd had too much to drink, about a courier who walked a bridge nobody else would walk, who got people out when the official channels were dead. He said the man went down on the last run, and they couldn't even put his name on the memorial because the name was never his to begin with." He swallowed. "He said it was the bravest thing he ever heard of, and the saddest, because the man died a ghost. No record, no grave, nothing." Walter said nothing. "He didn't die," Daniels said. He wasn't asking. "No," Walter said. "I bled in a safe house for 11 weeks. When I could walk, they offered me the same thing they offered all of us when a corridor was burned. A new name, a new country, a quiet life, and a promise that the old one would be erased so thoroughly that no one could ever use it against the people still in the field." He looked down at the boots on the counter. I took the bargain. They told me to bury the proof. So I buried it in the only place I knew nobody would ever think to look. The bottom of a working man's shoe. The first agent had taken out his phone. His hands weren't quite steady. I have to call this in. You have to do nothing of the kind yet, Walter said. Sit down, both of you. I'll tell you what's happening, because I think one of you already half knows. To Marcus's astonishment, the two men sat, one on the customer's bench, one on the edge of the workbench, like boys called to attention by a teacher whose authority they couldn't explain. 3 days ago, Walter said, a man came to find me. He wasn't one of yours. He knew things he shouldn't, used a name I haven't carried in 50 years. I think your agencies have been quietly tracing the old corridors, declassification reviews, the kind that happen when the men who made the rules start dying and someone in a basement office finally gets clearance to read what was sealed. Somebody found a thread. Somebody realized Courier 9 was never confirmed dead, only assumed. And once one person knows a ghost might be real, 2 kinds of people come looking. The kind who want to honor what happened. He turned his pale eyes on Daniels. And the kind who want to make sure it stays buried, because the corridor touched names that are still alive, still powerful, and would rather the road never existed. Which kind are we? Daniels asked. That, Walter said, is the only question that matters today. The first agent's phone buzzed in his hand. He looked at it. His face changed. He held it up so his partner could see. Marcus couldn't read it from where he stood, but he saw the way both men went rigid. They're sending a second team, the first agent said. Recovery and transport, ETA 20 minutes. Orders are to secure the document and the individual and bring him in for a closed debrief at a federal facility. He looked up, and for the first time there was something like fear in his face, not of Walter, but of his own people. No press, no record, no family notification, because there's no family on file. Because officially I'm already dead, Walter finished, and it's a great deal easier to disappear a dead man than a living one. The shop was silent. The radiator ticked. Somewhere out on Main Street a dog barked twice and went quiet. Marcus heard himself speak before he'd decided to. No, he said. No, he came into my shop. There are people who saw him. Hollis Tate saw him this morning. That woman with the sandals saw him 20 minutes ago. You can't just... He's not nobody. He's not a thing in a file. He's standing right here. The first agent looked at him with something close to pity. Son, you don't understand what you've walked into. Then explain it to me, Marcus said. Because from where I'm standing, 2 men with guns want to take an old hero out the back door so nobody ever knows he made it home, and I'm not going to help you do that. What would you do standing in that shop? Drop a comment. And if you believe some truths are worth protecting, no matter who wants them buried, subscribe. We're not done. Daniel stood up. He stood the way a man stands when he's made a decision he can't take back. He looked at his partner. Reyes, he said, we're not bringing him into a black site debrief. That's not a recovery. We both know what that is. Reyes, the first agent, ran a hand down his face. Daniels, those orders came from above the both of us. You walk away from this, you don't have a career, you might not have a life. My father carried that story for 40 years, like it was the only clean thing he ever did in that job, Daniels said. And the whole time it ate at him that the man got nothing, no medal, no name, not even a grave with the wrong name on it. His jaw tightened. I'm not going to be the one who finishes erasing him. I won't do it. For a moment the 2 agents simply looked at each other, and Marcus understood that something was being decided that was bigger than the room. A thing about what a man does when the institution he serves asks him to do the unforgivable. Walter watched them with the patience of someone who had seen this kind of decision made before, on bridges, in the dark, with the clock running. There's another way, Walter said. Both agents turned. 20 minutes, Walter went on. That's not enough time for me to run, and I'm too old to run anyway. But it's enough time to make me impossible to bury. He looked at Marcus. You said it yourself. Witnesses. A document. A name. The way you erase a man is by keeping him a secret. So we stop the secret, right now. How? Marcus asked. You photograph everything, Walter said. "The document, the map, the boots, the compartment, the stitching. You record me saying what I am. You send all of it, not to one place, to a dozen. Your email. A lawyer if you have one. A reporter. That historical society that keeps the town records. The more places it lives, the less any of it can disappear. A truth that exists in one file can be deleted. A truth that exists in 50 inboxes is a fact." He turned to Daniels. "And you. When that second team arrives, you don't hand them a ghost. You hand them an incident with 3 federal witnesses, a documented chain of custody, and a civilian who has already distributed the proof beyond recall. Let them try to make that quiet." Daniels almost smiled. "You planned this. Coming here. You didn't come to fix your boots." "I came to be found," Walter said simply. "By the right people. I gambled that if my road was being reopened, men like you would be on it too, not just the other kind. I needed somewhere ordinary, somewhere with a witness who had no reason to lie and no agency to protect." He glanced at Marcus. "A man who fixes shoes, in a town the world forgot. I'm sorry to have used you, but I needed exactly one honest stranger, and I found him." Marcus's hands were shaking, but he was already moving. Phone up, photographing the document, the map, the cut-open sole, the tight hand-sewn stitches that no machine had ever made. He photographed the red stamp, the struck-out name, the dates. He set the phone to record and held it up. "Say it," he said. "Say who you are." The old man looked into the small black lens, and when he spoke, his voice was steady and clear and 50 years old. "My name is no longer the one I was born with, and the name I served under was never mine to keep. They called me Cardinal, Courier 9. Operation Blacksmith, corridor designated Cardinal, from 1971 to 1972. I crossed the bridge 3 times. The first 2 crossings, we lost people, good people, brave people, whose names I still carry because no one else was left to. The 3rd crossing, every one of the 41 made it through. I carried their lives in the sole of a shoe because no border guard in the world searches the feet of a poor man. I was shot twice on the last crossing. I was told I died. I let the world believe it to protect the ones still in the dark. I am telling you now, while there is still breath in me, that it happened, that they were real, that they lived, and that I am still here." He lowered his eyes for a moment, then raised them again. "That is all. That is everything. Do with it what you will." Marcus stopped the recording. His thumbs flew across the screen, attaching, addressing, sending. To himself, to the County Historical Society, to a cousin who worked at a newspaper 2 towns over, to the only lawyer he knew, a man who'd handled his father's estate. He hit send and send and send, watching each little progress bar crawl and complete, until the proof was scattered across a dozen places and could never again be gathered up and made to vanish. "It's out," Marcus said. "It's gone. You can't put it back." Reyes was staring at the floor. When he looked up, the fight had drained out of him, replaced by something more complicated. The look of a man who has just been let off a hook he hadn't realized was about to gut him. "You understand what you've done," he said to Daniels. "There's no quiet ending to this now. It's a hearing, an inquiry. Names get asked about. People above us answer questions they spent 50 years making sure they'd never have to answer." "Good," Daniels said. Outside, the second sedan turned onto Main Street. It came slow, deliberate, and pulled in behind the first. 4 men this time. They got out the way the others had, buttoning jackets, scanning the street. But there was something heavier in the way they moved, something that didn't ask permission. Walter watched them through the window. He did not look afraid. He looked, Marcus thought, almost relieved, the way a man looks when a long-carried weight is finally about to be set down, one way or another. "Whatever happens in the next few minutes," Walter said quietly, "you did the right thing. Both of you." He looked at Marcus. "All 3 of you." The bell above the door chimed. The 4 men came in, and the lead one, older, gray at the temples, with the flat affect of a man who'd spent a career delivering bad news in calm rooms, took in the scene with a single sweep. The two agents, the civilian, the old man, the document on the counter. "Agent Reyes," he said. "Agent Daniels, I'll take it from here. You're relieved." Nobody moved. "The document," the grey man said, holding out a hand. "And the gentleman. We have a vehicle. This will all be handled appropriately." "It's already handled," Daniels said. The grey man's eyes flicked to him. "Excuse me?" "The material's been distributed," Daniels said evenly. "Photographs, a recorded statement, full chain of custody, sent to multiple civilian recipients before you arrived. A reporter, a historical society, a lawyer. It's not recoverable. There's no quiet version of this anymore, sir. There's only the version where Courier 9 surfaced alive, in front of federal witnesses, and we did the right thing. Or the version where you try to make a living man and 3 agents disappear in a shoe shop in front of a town full of people who already know he's here." He paused. "I'd think hard about which version ends up in front of a committee." The grey man stood very still. Marcus watched the calculation move behind his eyes, fast and cold. The weighing of orders against consequences, of buried things against the daylight that had just been let in. A long silence. Then the grey man let his hand fall. "You have no idea what you've started," he said. "I think I do," Walter said. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, until he stood close to the grey man, and Marcus saw that despite his years, the old man was the steadier of the two. "I started it 50 years ago on a bridge, with 41 strangers' lives in my shoe. I'm only finishing it now." He tilted his head. "You can have the boots if you want them for a museum someday, but you'll never have the name back. It's out of your hands. It's been out of your hands since the moment an honest man cut open that soul." The grey man looked at him for a long moment, and then, slowly, so slowly Marcus almost missed the moment it began. His shoulders changed. The hard line of command went out of them. He lowered his eyes, the way a soldier lowers his eyes when he learns too late what the man in front of him had done. "Courier 9, he said quietly. "We thought you were a story they told to make the rest of it bearable." "I was," Walter said. "I'm just a story that turned out to be true." The grey man was quiet a moment longer. Then he reached into his coat, and Reyes tensed, and Daniels shifted his weight. But the grey man only drew out a small notebook, the kind agents carry, and a pen. He wrote something, tore the page free, held it out to Walter. "That's a name and a number," he said. "A man at the agency who has spent 11 years trying to get the Blacksmith Corridor declassified and the couriers recognized. He'll think it's a hoax until he sees your proof. After that he'll move heaven and earth. He's the kind who'd want to." A pause. "There are more of us than you'd think who wanted this to come out. We were just never the ones who got to decide." Walter took the page, folded it once, slipped it into the breast pocket of his grey canvas coat. "Thank you," he said. The grey man nodded. He looked at the boots on the counter one last time, at the cut-open sole, the hand-stitched compartment, the small impossible thing that had held a war. Then he turned to his men. "We're done here," he said. "Stand down. We were never here." He glanced back over his shoulder. "And that is the last thing I'll ever order made to disappear." They filed out. The bell chimed, the 2 sedans pulled away from the curb and were gone, and Main Street was just Main Street again, grey and ordinary in the late morning light. Inside the shop, no one spoke for a while. Then Daniels exhaled a long, unsteady breath and sat down hard on the customer's bench, as if his legs had only just remembered they were tired. Reyes leaned against the wall and laughed once, short and disbelieving, the laugh of a man who had been certain he was about to do something he'd regret for the rest of his life, and had somehow not done it. Marcus stood behind his counter and looked at the old man, who was carefully, almost tenderly, re-wrapping the boots in their square of oilcloth. "I don't understand," Marcus said. "Why you? Why us? You could have taken this to anyone. A newspaper, a senator. Why a shoe shop in Calder's Bend?" Walter finished wrapping the boots. He set his hand on the bundle and was quiet a moment, choosing his words the way he always did. Because the people who erase men like me, he said, watch the senators and the newspapers. They have people in those rooms. The one place they don't watch is the ordinary world, the small towns, the men who fix things with their hands. He looked up, and his pale eyes had softened. Your grandfather repaired a pair of boots for a stranger in 1971. He never knew what was in them. He just did good work and asked no questions and let a tired man go on his way. I've remembered that kindness for 50 years. When it came time to surface, I wanted to do it in a place where I knew the work was honest. He almost smiled. I didn't know it would be his grandson behind the counter, but I'm glad it was. Marcus felt something turn over in his chest. He looked at the framed photograph above the back bench. 6 men in front of a stone building, faces washed pale by sun and time. He took it down and held it out. This has been on that wall my whole life, he said. Nobody ever knew who they were. Walter took the frame, looked at it for a long, long moment. His thumb moved across the glass, over a figure near the edge, younger, thinner, but unmistakably the same careful posture. That's the safe house in Vienna, he said softly. Spring of 72. After. We weren't supposed to take photographs. Someone did anyway. He touched the figure beside his own. That's the man who pulled me off the bridge. He didn't make it home either. He handed the frame back, and his voice had gone rough. Your grandfather must have kept it for me. I gave it to him to hold, the last time I came through, in case the world ever needed proof. I'd forgotten. 50 years, and I'd forgotten it was here. Marcus held the photograph and looked at it, as if for the first time. All those years it had hung in the shop, a relic with no story, and the story had been standing in front of him the whole time, waiting 50 years to be claimed. What happened to the old man after that day? Stay with us, because the story doesn't end in the shop. 6 weeks later, the declassification came down through official channels. A brief, clinical press release from the Department of State, acknowledging that a limited courier program, known by the cryptonym Blacksmith, had operated along a contested border corridor in the early 1970s, that personnel records had been partially sealed, and that the department was undertaking a review to formally recognize operators previously listed as lost. By then the story had already escaped. Marcus's cousin at the newspaper had run it first, carefully, with the document photographs and the recorded statement and a quote from Daniels, who had decided that if he was going to end his career, he might as well end it loudly. The wire services picked it up, then the national papers. A man who had been a ghost for 50 years had walked into a shoe repair shop in a forgotten Ohio town and asked an honest stranger to cut open his past, and the country, for a few weeks, could not stop talking about it. The hearing came in the spring. Marcus drove to Washington the day before. He had never been. He sat in a wood-paneled room that was smaller than he expected, in a row of chairs behind a long table, and watched men older than his grandfather would have been file in slowly. Some with canes, some in wheelchairs, all of them wearing some small piece of a service they had spent half a century forbidden to name. A faded lapel pin, a scarf, a ring. He testified third. He told them plainly what had happened in his shop. The boots, the compartment no machine had ever made, the document with the struck-out name, the old man who set everything down on his counter like it was made of glass. He held up the photographs. He answered their questions about chain of custody, about authentication, about why he believed what he believed. Because I cut it open myself, Marcus said. Because the stitching was done by hand, by someone who didn't want it found by accident. Because no one fakes a thing like that to fool a cobbler in a town nobody's heard of. And because when he told me what he was, I believed him before I had any proof. Some things you just know are true. When he stepped down, an old man in the front row reached out and gripped his hand and didn't let go for a long moment, and said nothing, because there was nothing that needed saying. Walter testified last. He walked to the table slowly, in a proper pair of shoes this time, his gray canvas coat pressed and clean. He gave his service designation. He confirmed the crossings. He named the corridor and the bridge and the dates, and when the chairwoman asked him gently to explain the discrepancy between his testimony and the official record that listed him as killed in February of 1972, he was quiet for a moment. When a corridor was compromised, he said, they would declare its operators dead. It protected the ones still working. It protected the people we had brought across, who had families left behind. A dead man can't be traded, can't be leveraged, can't be made to talk. So they killed me on paper, and I let them, because the living mattered more than the record. He paused. I have spent 50 years as a man with no name and no history, walking through a country I helped people reach, and never once able to say I had anything to do with it. I am not asking for thanks. I'm asking only that the ones who didn't come back be put on the wall with their right names. They earned that. I just carried the shoes. The room was silent. Then the chairwoman said that it was the recommendation of the committee that the operators of the blacksmith corridor be formally recognized, that those lost be added by name to the memorial, and that the surviving operator before them be awarded the recognition his service had been denied for half a century. And one by one, the old men in the front row stood. Slowly, painfully on canes and with the help of younger arms, they stood and raised their hands in salute to a man they had been told was dead for 50 years. Walter did not return the salute. He only nodded once and let his eyes travel across their faces, remembering. And Marcus, watching from the back row, saw the old man's composure finally break, just slightly, just at the corner of one eye, before he gathered it back in, the way he gathered everything, with care. Afterward, in the hallway, Marcus found him standing at a tall window looking out at the city. You did it, Marcus said. We did it, Walter said, not turning. I only ever carried things from one side to the other. That was always my whole job. Carrying. I carried lists and names and once a child's photograph, and now I've carried the truth across one last border, from a place where it was buried to a place where it can't be. He turned. And I had help on the road, the way I always did. I never made a single crossing alone. People think a courier walks alone. He doesn't. There's always someone who pulls you off the bridge. Marcus didn't know what to say, so he said the only true thing he had. I'm glad you came into my shop. Walter looked at him for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat and drew out the oilcloth bundle and set it in Marcus's hands. Keep them, he said. The boots. I don't need them anymore. They've finished their work, and so have I. He closed Marcus's fingers around the bundle. Put them somewhere people can see. Tell them the story. That's all that's left to do now. Make sure it isn't forgotten again. Marcus drove home the next day with the boots on the seat beside him. The shop looked the same when he unlocked it the following morning. The same shelves, the same racks, the same smell of oil and wax and leather. But it felt different now, the way a place feels different after you've learned what it really is. He built a small case by the front window, glass lined with felt. He set the boots inside, the left one turned so you could see the cut-open sole and the hand-stitched compartment that had held a war. Beside them, he placed a printed card. These boots crossed a contested border 3 times between 1971 and 1972, carrying documents and names that could not be carried any other way. The man who wore them was listed as killed in February of 1972. He was not. He lived 50 years as a ghost so that others could live as themselves. His name, when it was finally his to give, he gave freely. He hung the framed photograph above the case. 6 men in front of a stone building in Vienna, faces no longer anonymous, each one named now in small letters on a second card below. Customers came in, the way they always had, with their loafers and their work boots and their children's scuffed school shoes. But now some of them stopped at the case by the window. They read the card. They looked at the cut-open sole, at the impossible little compartment, and Marcus watched their faces change as they understood what they were looking at. Is this real, they would ask? Yes, Marcus would say, it's real. And then he would tell them the story, the way Walter had asked him to. The old man who set the ugliest boots in the world on the counter like they were made of glass. The compartment no machine had ever sewn. The document with the name struck out, as if a man could be unmade by a typewriter. the agents who came to bury him, and the one who chose, instead, to bring him into the light. Walter wrote, sometimes. A postcard now and then, from one quiet town or another, never with a return address, always signed with a single letter, C for the name he'd carried longest. He went to the memorial dedication that autumn, where the lost couriers' names were added to the wall, spelled right at last. He sent Marcus a photograph of it. In the picture, the old man stood beside the stone, with his hand resting flat against the cut letters of a name that had never appeared anywhere before, and he was, for once, almost smiling. Marcus kept that photograph on the wall too, and every morning, at 7:14, when the lights flickered on in Renner's shoe repair and the radiator clanked itself awake and the smell of oil and wax filled the narrow shop, Marcus would pause for just a moment by the case in the window. He'd look at the boots, at the worn thin heel and the cut-open sole, and he'd think about all the years they had sat hidden, holding their secret, waiting for an honest stranger to cut them open. He had learned something, standing behind that counter the day the old man came in. He had learned that the most ordinary things can carry the heaviest truths. That value hides where no one thinks to look, under the worn sole of a poor man's shoe, behind a photograph nobody asks about, inside a quiet old man in a borrowed pair of sneakers. He had learned that history doesn't always live in monuments. Sometimes it walks in off the street, sets itself down on your counter, and asks you, simply, to look closer before you throw it away. So Marcus looked closer now, at everything, at everyone. He picked up each worn-out shoe a customer brought him and turned it over in his hands and wondered, just for a second, what it might be carrying. Most carried nothing but miles, but every now and then, he thought, every 50 years or so, one of them carries the whole world hidden under the heel, and all it ever needed was one honest person willing to look. Have you ever held something ordinary in your hands and never known what it truly was? Tell us about it in the comments, and if you believe that some truths are worth protecting no matter how long they've been buried, that the people history tried to erase deserve to be remembered, then subscribe. There are more of them out there, more boots on more counters, more ghosts still waiting for one honest stranger to look closer, and we're going to keep telling their stories, one frozen moment at a time.